Today is Wednesday, July 29th, 2026. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Lindsey Graham laid to rest. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can always email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. That's our email address. Give us a shout. We like hearing from you because we're glad you're with us, getting through the news of the day as we are doing each and every weekday bright and early. With me today, CBN's Travis Phillips. And Billy is off, by the way, filming his third installment, the third and final installment of investigating the supernatural, heaven and hell. Be on the lookout for that when it eventually gets produced and finished, because it's going to be amazing, as were the first two. But so anyway, he's out doing that. Coming up on the Focus story, just released documents shed light on the true origin of the COVID lockdowns.
Brand new diary entries from Fauci catch him in seemingly another noble lie of his. So we'll get into those details here in just a few minutes.
All right, looking forward to that coming up in just a moment. And then on the main thing, The Chosen just released a brand new trailer for season 6, and it's tackling the crucifixion, obviously a difficult scene. Raj Nair has more on that coming up on the main thing. All right, I'm going to tell you about our sponsors, Christian Solidarity International, CSI. A new global report is shining a spotlight on a crisis that we know doesn't get a ton of headlines. It gets them here, and that is Christian persecution. And the 2026 Global Persecution Index estimates now that 388 million Christians worldwide are living under high levels of persecution or discrimination because of their faith. The report says conditions are worsening in countries, of course, Nigeria, but also some interesting ones, Nicaragua, Syria, and India, with believers facing violence, imprisonment, and severe restrictions on religious freedom. Well, CSI is active in many of those areas on the front lines, helping those persecuted Christians. We've told you some of the individual stories that they're actively working on, and in places like Nigeria, Sudan, Egypt, beyond. And so they've been doing it for 50 years, and they have incredible results. Hundreds of thousands of people saved, many, many even more help. And if you want to walk alongside those efforts, it's real simple. Just go to csi-usa.org/quickstart. That's csi-usa.org/quickstart. And you too can help persecuted Christians in need around the globe. All right, going to go to the news in 90 now, and President Trump delivered one of the keynote eulogies yesterday during funeral services honoring longtime South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who died earlier this month at the age of 71. President Trump recalled how their relationship began with a bitter 2016 primary feud, including the infamous moment he publicly shared Graham's cell phone number, but joked that it ultimately led to a decade-long friendship. The president praised Graham as a tireless lawmaker, saying nothing of consequence happened in Washington without Graham knowing about it, and credited him with playing a role in major legislative battles, including Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation. Trump also paid tribute to Graham's devotion to family, highlighting how he helped raise his younger sister after their parents died. And Cracker Barrel will reportedly pay outgoing CEO Julie Massino about $4.6 million in exit compensation over the next 2 years, and continue covering her personal security costs for as long as the company's board considers it necessary. She's stepping down as CEO on August 10th after overseeing a controversial rebrand that attempted to modernize stores and even removed the chain's longtime Uncle Herschel branding. Changes that sparked customer backlash, declining sales, and criticism from President Trump before the company reversed course. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. Trey, where do I sign up to go into a company, mess it up royally, and then get paid a few $1 million for my efforts? I mean, this is something else. I mean, she went in there, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What are we doing with Cracker Barrel? We talked about it at the time. This is crazy, and this is just the world we live in now. I guess CEOs get these. I mean, and there's been ones way bigger than this, but still, that's $2.3 million a year here for the next 2 years, all for going in there and trying one of the worst rebrands in recent history.
Yeah, I think these corporate executive, like C-suites. Obviously, at the end of the day, you would think that the goal is to make a lot more money. Obviously, you
Right.
don't want to be in the red, you want to be in the black. But I don't know. It seems like with whether it was this rebrand, and now ultimately, of course, they walked it back completely, and they had egg on their face, and that's all said and done. But at the time, it seemed like it was often what Disney says, which is they continue to lose money with the movies that they release in theaters, and somehow it's not their fault. It's not the company's fault for creating bad products. It's, well, these people, they just don't know what's good for them. They won't buy these movies, and they don't like that rebrand. I don't get it, but it's not my fault. It's their fault. It's the American people's fault for not liking it. And for some reason, that argument works. And people like Julie Massino, not that she's not an intelligent person, as I know she was successful in past endeavors that she's had before she came to Cracker Barrel. So, whatever. I'm not saying that she doesn't have skills, but this was a royal mess up. I mean, she messed this up completely, and she's continuing to fail upward, I guess. So, I don't know. Sign me up for a job where I can do whatever I want and then absolve myself of all responsibility in the end and walk away with a nice chunk of change in my wallet.
I know it's living the dream. She's living the dream. But if any of these lessons learned, but to your point, Trey, I don't know. A lot of times when people decide they want to go woke, it just seems like nothing will stop them. They don't care how much they fail or how many millions they lose. They just want to keep pushing it. So we'll see what happens. But nevertheless, we're going to go to the focus story now. And, speaking of failing often, here's an update on Anthony Fauci now with these uncovered diary entries. What do they say about the lockdowns?
Yeah, I tell you what, this is a controversy that just refuses to die. It just year after year, there continues to be more revelations about what actually went on when it came to the federal government's COVID response. So a March 15th, 2020 entry headlined in Fauci's diary as "Big Day," all caps and with an
So
exclamation
exciting.
mark. It sounds like this was like his ticket to Disney World, whereas everybody else, it was like the day we're dreading. It's the day that our lives ended as we know it, and businesses started their declines, many of which ended up shuttering because of it. But it was a big day for Anthony Fauci. He describes telling readers, there were never supposed to be readers of this diary, I presume, but that he personally convinced Mayor Bill de Blasio, then Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York City, to close the city's schools, bars, and restaurants, crediting his own TV appearances as the deciding factor. Fauci actually said in the entries, I reached out to have calls with, in California, Governor Cuomo, and in New York City, Bill de Blasio. But wonderfully, both of them, before I even had to open my mouth to convince them to shut their cities and their states down, they had already seen me on television and decided, based on what I had said on TV, that they needed to go ahead and shut down their state in California, and in de Blasio's case, New York City. And then 5 days later, in another entry, Fauci said he advised Bill de Blasio to order a full citywide, quote, shelter-in-place, overriding pushback from then Governor Cuomo. And then a March 29th entry recounts Fauci pushing a reluctant President Trump to extend the initial 15-day mitigation period to 30 days. He said that Trump was incorrigible, but thankfully he was ultimately able to convince the then first-term president to continue extending the lockdowns. And then a November 28th, 2020 entry describes Fauci backing a Los Angeles County health official's push for a 3-week shutdown amid a hospital capacity surge in the city. So, yeah, he had plenty of journal entries where he was fawning, I guess, over himself at his successful TV appearances that led to the shuttering of states and cities around the U.S.
And how does this square with what Fauci has said publicly?
Well, this is where, as I said at the top of the podcast, the noble lie piece of the story comes in, because now for years, Fauci has repeatedly denied that he ever had anything to do with ordering any shutdowns in any state or any city across the United States, much less in a state as populous as California or a city as populous as New York City. But in an October 2022 interview with ABC's Jonathan Karl, he insisted he, quote, had nothing to do with school closures, and said the transcript actually showed him urging schools to stay open. And then he told The Hill that same year that he, quote, did not recommend locking anything down. And then January 2024, in a testimony before the House Oversight Committee, he again said that he did not close the schools and framed himself as having become nothing more than just a political target in a football that was being kicked around by conservatives. And he repeated that denial yet again in a 2022 podcast appearance, deflecting responsibility to the CDC's epidemiologist, saying yet again that he had nothing to do with recommending any shutdowns around the country. Yet we look at these new journal entries, Dan, where Fauci was very clearly bragging about the fact that it was his appearances on TV doing his circuit, making a name for himself, that, in his words, thankfully led to these cities and states shutting down at his recommendation before he even had to make the recommendation, because they saw his TV appearances and were so concerned that they decided, before being told by Fauci, that they're just going to shut down themselves. So this doesn't seem like a person who wasn't involved in the shutdowns to me.
Yeah. I mean, and if Saturday Night Live was worth their salt, they would definitely do a Dear Diary, sort of Jack Handy type vibe bit with Anthony Fauci. What else has Fauci been criticized for saying?
Well, as far as I can tell with my count, the latest count, this is now number 3. The third, not that there haven't been other smaller situations of, I'm not sure how we would describe it, if we want to call them lies or just misleading, but this is the third one that seems to be a pretty clear lie, writing privately that he was encouraging lockdowns and saying publicly that he was not encouraging lockdowns. He similarly said Americans do not need to be wearing a mask. There's no reason to walk around wearing masks. And then he later said, well, I said that even though it wasn't true, because I wanted to preserve the masks for hospital personnel. They actually would have been helpful, but I initially said don't wear them. But that was a lie. I just said that so that we wouldn't be running a shortage on masks. And then the other one that's received a ton of criticism is the 6-foot distancing recommendation. He actually pushed that for months and months and months, as we all know. And then in a congressional hearing, he said, well, there's actually have not been any studies that have suggested that we should be distancing at 6 feet, and there's no evidence that would necessarily do anything to mitigate COVID. He said, I just heard that from somebody along the way, and I thought, well, that makes sense. Certainly being at a greater distance to each other is probably a good idea, so we'll just start saying that the science shows us that we need to be distancing ourselves at 6 feet, and then later, yet again, he acknowledged there's no real evidence to suggest that was true. That was just what I was saying because I figured it would be helpful. So it's just ironic to hear all of this out of the mouth of the man who said, trust the science, just follow the facts of the science. And then 3 of the quote unquote facts of the science turned out to be lies.
It's really quite something because there was so much information. There were daily press conferences and they just fire hosed information at people and different recommendations and things. And I feel like the gaslighting has been extra when it comes to the COVID era. Feels like a lot of people want you to forget. They want to memory hole some of the things that we went through. And it is hard to remember it all because we were experiencing so many different things. There were rules, there were regulations. You couldn't go to these stores without a mask. There were these ridiculous plastic barriers just hanging in midair as if that was going to somehow stop air particles from floating around them. Just silly things that felt like mind games so much of the time. And whether a lot of it was born out of good intentions or not, it still ended up being what felt like a trial run for controlling the population when the government wants to. And it sure felt like a trial run and that we were the guinea pigs. I think if another pandemic of some kind or some outbreak was happening, I don't think the American people go for this again.
Well, I can tell you, I think the only people who would do it would be those who want to virtue signal their disdain for conservatives or
Yeah.
their dislike of Trump, because I think that really was the origin for a lot of people. It was, well, I'm wearing the mask so that I can show you that I'm kind of sticking it to the conservative man who's in charge. I'm showing that I actually am somebody who has a working brain, and I want to protect my neighbor. That ended up really, I think, being more than anything, it was just a public declaration against conservative ideology, because the vast majority of people, I think, figured out pretty early on. It's like, man, I can't really function in a normal life and continue to make money, provide for my family, much less have a good mental health when I am isolating myself from all of humanity and all of creation by putting on a mask, maintaining a 6+ foot distance from people, remembering to be terrified of other human beings. All of that, I think, is just a sick experiment that I think led to a lot of breakdowns in society. And I think that it's not a mistake that it attacked a fundamental principle that we know is true from Scripture, which is we're designed to live in community. We're designed to bear one another's burdens, to go through life together. Human beings are not intended or created to live in isolation. We're designed to live in community. I think we saw a clear attack on the nuclear family, and we saw a clear attack on humanity coming together and being physically in the same space. And I don't think that was accidental. I think that there were plenty of people who were maybe well-intentioned, but I think it's clear now, all these years removed, that Satan, the enemy, used COVID as a way to rip society apart. And unfortunately, we're still dealing with a lot of the consequences of that.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see how these hearings go and if anything comes of it as we look back on the COVID era and some of the things that Dr. Fauci, among others, advised and coerced in many instances the country to do. So appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today. And we are going to go to the main thing now. And The Chosen just released a new trailer for season 6, and it's pretty raw and also gruesome and difficult to watch, as crucifixion should be, of course. CBN's Raj Nair has more on this for today's main thing.
A brand new trailer for season 6, and it's raw, it's gruesome, and rightfully, it's difficult to watch. I'm glad they decided to show the barbarity and the horror of the crucifixion of the living God. And if you will, I have a verse or two I think that we should read together. Check this out. This is from the Old Testament, from the book of Isaiah. Just as there were many who were appalled at him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any human being, and his form marred beyond human likeness. So, there's the transition, my friend. So he will sprinkle many nations, including you, including me, and the kings will shut their mouths because of him. For what they were not told, they will see, and what they have not heard, they will understand. And just a couple more verses. If you don't know this, Yeshua, if you think to yourself, how could the living God become a man and be hung up on a tree? That's the good news. That's the whole point, that God so loved you that he became a man and took up our sin and our failures and our iniquity and says, I love them so much, I'm going to do this for them. And Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Just a couple more verses that I think just really encouraged my soul. From just a little bit farther down in Isaiah 53. Surely, again, this was written 700 years before Jesus showed up on the scene. Surely he took up our pain. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. My friend, here it is. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds, we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. And that is the good news. And what's even better is that he was crucified. He was placed in a tomb, but the tomb couldn't hold him. And he rose again on the third day, holding the keys of death and hell. He is victorious. He has made a way. You don't have to earn your identity, your value, your purpose, your significance. It was given to you by the most ridiculous act of love the world has ever seen. And so I think this trailer is appropriate. It's hard to watch. It's difficult, but that's the lengths that our God went to show and to prove just how much he loves you.
I appreciate that, Raj. Good word there. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
We are looking at Psalm 25:5. It says, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long."
Yeah. Make sure that we're not being led by other things, by the wind and the waves and false doctrines, etc. Make sure that it's his truth and God's truth in scripture that is leading us. All right, get on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. God bless. We shall see you back here tomorrow.